Today is 10 June 2025. We are at the Community Media Center in Westminster, Maryland. My name is Bill Palm, and joining me today is Mike Lecza. Thank you for being with us today, Mike, and sharing your story of service. And I guess my first question is, how did you end up in the Army?
Honestly, some old friends of mine I ran into a couple years ago at my brother's house in Connecticut had said, he goes, joining the Army was probably the best thing I did because I'd probably ended up in jail or dead. I was a bit of what we used to call heathen way back in my younger years. But I had married an old friend of mine who had 4 kids. Mainly because I felt sorry for the kids, you know, and then I got laid off and nobody was hiring, and I was like, man, I says, maybe I'll go in the service for a couple years, get back on my feet, and, you know, because when I went in, I had no intention of being in as long as I was. But yeah, I ended up joining the Army.
And you were up in New England?
Up in Connecticut, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And where did you go for basic?
Fort Jackson. Went there for basic and AIT.
Okay. So what was basic like down there?
Hot. I think I spent my 25th birthday in basic. And I was on crutches for right around that time too, because I had pulled the ligaments in my ankle. But yeah, I'm from New England. Mm-hmm. You know, so I'm used to cold winters, you know, and down there at Fort Jackson, I mean, it was hot, mm-hmm. You know, lots of bugs, you know, all winter long, you know, and then, once we graduated basic, they just put us on a bus and took us across the post to another building, and that's where we were for our AIT. So I spent quite some time there.
And your advanced individual training was?
Was 63 light wheel mechanic.
Okay. So you actually picked up job skills, maybe?
No. I was a mechanic before I went in, and my recruiter actually laughed at me when he saw what I picked, because he was like, "You're not going to learn anything." Mm-hmm. And a couple weeks into AIT, the instructors started calling me Mr. GM because I would argue with them about stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Sergeant, I'm not trying to be a wise guy." I says, "But you know," I said, "you're trying to teach people mechanics who don't know anything about mechanics." I says, "and you're giving them wrong information." Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a bit of an argument between me and the instructors, but I graduated top of the class. You know, I was an honor graduate, and you know, honestly, the only thing I learned there was how to fill out the maintenance paperwork, which they could have taught me when. And I think it was the cycle or two after mine, they actually started a program that if you had prior experience, you could just test out. But they had me on what they called the fast track, which is so every what they called segment, or you know, every piece of training, I had to take 2 tests. You know, so I had to take the same test as everybody else, but then they gave me another test, and if I failed one of them, then I was back with the other guys. But you know, I had my own room. You know, I was off the duty roster. You know, so you know, for most of AIT, because I was in that program, so it had its perks.
Yeah. And then where did you go?
From there I went to jump school because they had told me that the only way I could get that job was to agree to go airborne. And I was like, nah, I don't know about that. I said, I'm a mechanic. What am I going to jump out of an airplane with a toolbox? I said, no, I don't think so. Well, all the way through AIT, they kept telling me I couldn't do anything until I got to jump school. So, you know, I get to jump school, and then they're telling me, oh, they could have done the paperwork while you were in AIT. And I'm like, oh, boy, great. I said, so, yeah, they were like, well, you can't drop until this afternoon, and if you want to drop, you go see the first sergeant, you know. So they dropped me, and he says, you'll be done with airborne school in 15 days. He says, but he says, if you drop from the course, they're going to put you on holdover. He says, and then he said, it could be a month or 2 before you leave here. He said, you'd be open for worldwide assignment. And I was like, yep, no, I don't want to jump out of an airplane. And he said, okay, well, I lucked out. I got orders for Germany, you know.
Okay, and this would be right around 1992.
This was spring of '92. Yeah. And then I was in Germany from '92 to '96.
Okay, and you were still accompanied by a family?
No. We had
No.
gotten divorced during that time. I went back to get her, and her and the kids were gone.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it happens.
Yeah.
You know.
So, 92, you're in Germany, and who are you assigned to?
165th MI Battalion. It was we had interrogators, we had counterintelligence, we had electronic warfare, and we had what they referred to as a LRPS company, a long range patrol company. I lived in the barracks, and my room was up in the LRPS part of the barracks, and there were petitions going around to get them removed from the barracks and sent down the street to an abandoned building that was down there because these guys were just maniacs.
Well, yeah.
They were throwing furniture out the windows and bowling in the hallway with beer bottles for pins with a bowling ball, you know. So, you know, I had one guy knock on my door one morning. He said, "Hey, you got any eggs?" You know, I said, "Sure." So I get my thing was about 4 or 5 eggs in the carton that was in my refrigerator. And he goes, "Watch this." And he goes like 3 doors down, and he knocks on some guy's door, and the guy opens the door, and he starts throwing eggs at him. And I'm like, dude, yeah. You know, just the crazy stuff that went on in the barracks. Soldiers work hard, but they play even harder sometimes. Things get a little interesting off duty.
Yeah. Well, LRPS had a specialized function, and it sounds like you were in well, everybody else there had a slightly different function.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they were there.
Well, the LRPS guys were basically their motto was "Eyes behind the lines."
Yeah.
And these guys did not wear helmets or gas masks in the field because their job was to jump behind enemy lines and with radios and just watch stuff and just send back intel. So it's kind of like, you know, they called them their spider holes or their hide holes, you know, where they would go out to the field and they would dig a hole on the side of a hill somewhere and just watch the towns around them and, you know, send back intel. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that one either.
In the middle of all that, you're still a mechanic?
No, well, yeah. Well, I wasn't with them. My room was in their part of the barracks.
Right.
But I did get sent to the field with them several times. And yeah, they were a nutty bunch.
But you were with people who gathered and
Yeah, the whole battalion was all
intel stuff. So they were sort of the scouts.
Oh yeah.
Physically.
Well, the first company I was in the battalion was the interrogator company.
Right.
So, you know, we'd go out to the field and they'd set up tents and they'd have people who were playing prisoners and, you know, and they couldn't even end the field exercise until they got the guy to spit out whatever information they were supposed to be getting. So we've had several field problems go longer because the guy was just being hard-headed, you know. It's like, dude, look, I want a shower, you know. I want something besides MREs and, you know, frozen food heated up in a water bath. But
okay. Yeah. And then from there you went?
From Darmstadt, I ended up at Campbell.
Okay.
For 2 years. I spent 2 years with 5th Aviation. Went to air assault school while I was there. Left Campbell the same rank I got there, so I was told when I left that I was doing good. Campbell was definitely a wild place. I spent the 2 years I was there, I spent 18, 19 months of that on what they call DRF-1. So I had a pager, and if it went off, I had 2 hours to get to the airfield with my bags in uniform. And most of the time it was just an exercise, but a handful of times they actually loaded us up on planes and we took off. A couple times we just flew around for a couple hours and then landed and got everything off the plane. One time they actually flew us out to an abandoned airfield in Myrtle Beach. And we're unloading stuff from the planes, and here comes the battalion XO. He's coming out of the building in a Hawaiian shirt and shorts, jumping into a Humvee with no canvas on it because we load him without the canvas on him. And he's like, I'll be back. And he come back about 45 minutes later with a couple of kegs of beer, and so we just hung out there for a day or two, and then loaded everything back up on the plane and went back. But it was kind of, Campbell was kind of a tough assignment because I was there 2 years, but I was on call for 18, 19 months of that. So I unless I was on leave, I really couldn't do much. I mean, I actually made it to Nashville twice in the 2 years, but that was probably about it.
Yeah.
And then, about a year into the assignment at Campbell, I started calling the Department of the Army. I'm like, hey, send me back to Germany. This place is crazy, And I managed to get orders to go back to Germany by way of Jackson again. I had to go back there for a refresher course on something before they would let me go back to Germany. So, yeah.
So you were a mechanic on
Oh,
whatever they had.
generators, trailers, Humvees, pickup trucks, welding, big trucks. I've worked track vehicles, multiple launch rocket systems, howitzers. I mean, there's
What kind of rocket?
multiple launch rocket systems. That was my third assignment, was an MLRS unit.
Yeah. I mean, there's just that's
It's a tracked vehicle that has a big box on the back of it, and basically they drive around until the light blinks on the dashboard, and they push the button, and the vehicle stops, the brakes lock, and shutters come down, and they're sitting there sealed inside the cab, and then the box on the back, it's all done by computer and electronics and satellites. The unit's name was called Grid Smashers because the one rocket that they could fire out of that system would destroy a square kilometer. I mean, just flatten it.
and that's all with high explosive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A couple $1 million a piece from what I understand for each one of those rockets. But,
Ouch. Yeah. Yeah.
But when we'd go out to the training areas, that they would shoot what they called ripper rounds, and it was basically a telephone pole with a guidance system on it and a rocket engine, and they're like, hey, you want to shoot this thing? I'm like, sure, so I got to shoot some, expensive telephone poles across the training area.
Yeah. But they were all guided. You didn't have the old-fashioned.
Yeah, they were guided.
Yeah. I date back to when they had Honest John rockets that were just you point and shoot.
Well, they had Sparrows and Red Eyes back then too, didn't they? Or the Red Eye was just coming out back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, there's a guy here in Maryland who was with the unit in Germany that helped develop the doctrine for the Red Eyes. I can't think of his name, but I have his books. They're excellent. I mean, they're really good books.
And through all of this, you were a mechanic. And so what you had was the manual.
Well, yeah, you got the manual. And I always told my guys, I said, if you have the book, you can fix just about anything. I mean, even now. I mean, I bought a new motorcycle back in 16. And I told the dealer, I said, I want the factory manuals for this bike. And I've gotten rid of that bike, but I still got the manuals. I've got a library of manuals in my garage that, that's one of the first things I do. My wife had a old beat up Explorer, which I made her get rid of last October because reverse finally went out in it. And I'm like, no, we're done fixing this thing. Just.
But you ended up with all sorts of units. You started off with intelligence.
So my first unit was an intel unit. My second unit was an aviation unit. My third unit was a tracked artillery unit. My last unit was an artillery unit. Was towed howitzers, the big cannons.
Yeah, I did 155.
That's what these were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were 155s.
Yeah.
Well, and then from there, after I got out, I worked for a trucking company in Alaska for a year. And then I got a job on base working in the utility department. But then a year after that, I landed a job at the Northern Warfare Training Center out of Fort Wainwright, Alaska, which did all the Arctic survival and mountain climbing training for the Army. So I worked for them for about 6 years or so before my ex decided it was time to leave Alaska. And then I came down here and worked for the National Cemetery in Baltimore for 11 years and change until I had to get away from there. Just the bureaucracy and the foolishness and the way that I said okay, we spend all our time taking care of vets. once they're in their final resting place. I said, but 90% of our staff were vets, and the way we were treated was kind of crummy. So I was like, I got to get out of here. So about 3 years ago, I made the jump to Homeland Security, and I've been working on contract paperwork for them since. But that'll end this week.
But okay. But by that time, you're not doing mechanical stuff. You're doing paperwork.
Not anymore. Yeah, now I'm just doing paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
Still tinker,
On your own.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking for a house now for me and my wife to move into. And I told her, I said, it's got to have a big garage.
Mm-hmm.
I need somewhere to tinker. Or we'll drive each other crazy.
How'd you end up in Carroll County?
When we first moved to Maryland, we were living in Parkville, which was okay. But then once we sold our house in Alaska, I wanted to move up to Carroll County, but my ex wanted to move to Howard because she said the schools are better. And then when we ended up splitting, we both ended up here in Carroll County. So it was like, okay, I love it out here. Mm-hmm. It's peaceful. I'm a city kid, so I'm used to. And honestly, Bridgeport is just. It's basically a smaller version of Baltimore. It's not as big, but it has the same issues. The old, the old factory shut down. The rough parts of town. Just the poverty. The old stores that have been there for generations just shut up. It's the same thing as Baltimore. It's just smaller. It's got a harbor. It's all the same. But like it out here, I'm extremely busy with the VFW. I'm a Legion member. I'm a Lion. That one, thanks to my wife. She roped me into that one. I was like, wait a minute. I said, what do you mean I joined the Lions? And she's like, well, you do a lot for the Lions. You should get credit for it. And I said, well, I don't do it for credit. I do it to help you guys. And she's like, well, you did it. And I was like, well, don't you have to fill out paperwork and sign it? And she's like, I signed it. So I said, that's illegal. And I said, because we weren't married then. Mm-hmm. She filled out that. She's like, I paid your dues, so just be quiet. And I said, well, I'm more of a jackass than a lion. Just saying. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Lions Carnival just ended in Mount Airy, last weekend, and I was there all week working, And then the VFW, I belong to the post here in town. I'm actually the judge advocate for the post here in town. I'm also the senior commander for the district that we're in. And I'm also the state judge advocate for Department of Maryland. Mm-hmm. So that keeps me busy.
What was your rank in the Army?
I was a sergeant promotable when I got medically retired.
Okay, as in 5 going on 6, or? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep, I was a motor sergeant. So everybody thought I was nuts, and I kind of had a reputation for that because my first motor sergeant, when I was a private, taught me some lessons that I took to heart. And one is that if you're doing your job and you're the best at what you do, don't let anybody push you around and make you not do your job or interfere with you. So we had a brand new sergeant major to the battalion, last unit I was in. And we were getting ready to go to the field, and me and my guys were working on the equipment. And new sergeant major walks in, starts harassing one of my guys, just about dumb stuff. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like he needed a haircut or anything like that. But, so I caught on to it, and I walked up to him, and I said, Sergeant Major, I said, we got work to do around here. If you don't have anything to do, the door's right there. And he just looked at me. And I said, you can go. And he turned around and walked out. Well, the next day, Colonel comes walking through the motor pool. He said, Sergeant Lecza. Sir? He said, I hear you met the new Sergeant Major yesterday. I said, yes, sir. I said, how did you hear about that? He said, well, he stormed into my office, and he said, there was some buck sergeant who told me if I didn't have anything to do, to get out of his area. He said, oh, I guess you met Sergeant Lecza. But my company had the highest mission-capable rating in battalion for years. Everything went to the field on its own power, and everything came back on its own power. So it's, I told my guys, if you're the best at what you do, they'll cut you some slack, but you can't get ridiculous. I do miss mostly my brothers and sisters, the people I served with. I spent a lot of time running around the planet, going to places that most people wouldn't want to go. So now I spend a lot of time traveling the country, seeing parts of the country that, I protected that I haven't seen yet. And every trip I make, I always try and visit one of my people I served with.
So you've maintained contact?
With as many as I can. There's only a few that I have no idea where they are. Lost a few while I was in. As a matter of fact, one's at Arlington, and I know exactly where he is, but I haven't been there yet. I can't go down there by myself. Chris, my buddy who just left here, he knew him too. So I've told him and my other buddy, I'm like, look, guys, I said, we need to make a trip to Arlington to go see Ben. I said, because I can't do it by myself.
Yeah. So, sort of a fraternity.
Oh, absolutely. A friend of mine's son went in last year, airborne infantry. I saw him last week, and I told his mom before he left, I said, Zeb played high school sports. He played sports when he was a kid. I said, he made some friends that he'd probably keep for a while. I said, that's nothing. I said, he'll make friends in the service that he'll keep forever.
It's been a delight talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and greatly appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for doing this. I mean, like I told a buddy of mine, told me retirement's boring. I said, no, dude, trust me. I says, I got enough to keep me just as busy as I want to be.